What were the experiences in Donald Trump's earlier life that made him the man that he is today? What are the parallels to his earlier experiences that would have given us a little hint at the particular kind of behaviors he's exhibiting, not related to ICE necessarily, but as Trump is a partially or wholly owned subsidiary of Russian state security under the watchful eye of Vladimir Putin. And what I found as a Trump watcher for 45 odd years, an interesting parallel that I thought about today and read back at the exploits of Trump, the real estate genius, going back almost to the 70s, was his relationship with organized crime and in Atlantic City, and then in Manhattan as well. So you will not be shocked to learn that organized crime played an important part in New York, New Jersey construction, right? Breaking news. If you, it, yeah, the five families were instrumental in in the trades, in construction and electricians and plumbers and the like, and also concrete, building materials, labor, labor racketeering, and in just about every element of the professional skills and consultancies that you would need to complete projects in New York in the 70s, 80s, and beyond. So early in his career, Donald Trump was affiliated with some of the people, the headline acts of organized crime in New York were, uh, well, the families, right? So the Gambino family, which was at that point uh, certainly in the 80s, uh, certainly during the 80s, was the biggest and most powerful crime family in the country. Carlo Gambino, founder, but Paul Castellano, who was the boss during I guess, the late 70s and the early 80s. You could, you really couldn't be in the business of real estate development as a builder of large commercial structures without an interaction with organized crime. So the title of the essay today is, Wiseguy Wannabe. And there's an interesting parallel where, Trump wanted to be the big guy, the king of New York, the king of, the biggest developer. And he had some things sort of working against him. Swimming against the tide was that on one side, in the birth of the grievance monster category, was that the big money old New York developers would never give Trump what he thought was his due. They looked at him like a like a nouveau riche prick, a new guy on the stage that thinks he's everything and he's flashy and he's showing off his money. And many of these folks are more Park Avenue, old money, or had some good sense and taste. And that didn't appeal to them. So in the social circles, and I mean, very high society. These were all multimillionaires when that was a lot of money, as it is to me and you today. But with the Elon half a trillion, it's almost quaint to think of like, well, I made my first million. It's like, yeah, there are kids doing that on, on TikTok this afternoon before dinner. So Trump is always was never implicated with being a member of an organized crime organization because who the hell would have him, right? Yeah. Like a spoiled rich kid, spoiled prick kid of a man who was a developer of more modest real estate, a lot of it. Fred, Donald's father, the one that ruined this whole thing, along with Barack Obama, by Fred never showing him any love, and then Barack Obama embarrassing him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. So that just, there's too much for his ego to handle. He ran for president, and the rest is the end of world, end of days scenario that we're in right now. But let's think of something more joyful, like murder and influence with organized crime. So Trump, after casino gambling was legalized in Atlantic City in '76, we'll call it. And in the '80s, Trump acquired casinos and then built the Taj Mahal, which was at that time the biggest casino in Atlantic City. But you don't do that without the help of organized crime. Right? So to buy that concrete, you had to deal with either Paul Castellano or Fat Tony Salerno, right? Who Mr. Salerno was the head of the Genovese crime family, and Castellano the Gambinos, who were two big dogs in New York. I mean, the Bonanos were famous for perhaps in an earlier decade being the stars of international finance and managing the heroin trade from Sicily to the United States in a French Connection kind of way. You might have seen the movie. Gene Hackman, if you haven't, it's worth a watch or a rewatch. One of the Gene Hackman, one of the greatest character actors of any time. But so here's Trump wanting to have the intrigue of sidling up to these guys. The kind of like, I'm kind of a big guy, so I can hang with these dudes and live a little bit dangerous. Well, he didn't drink, so that probably probably kept him out of some of the social functions. But he there were once the casinos were built, there were guys like a guy with a great name, which is Labooty, who was a big time gambler and a medium time wise guy who one of his besties was John Gotti. You might have heard of the Teflon Don, who was Paul Castellano's um, in corporate parlance. It was his successor in interest in the Gambino crime family. But of course, successor was due to the fact that John Gotti murdered Paul Castellano. So that's how you make friends and influence people and move along in a complex organization like that. But this gentleman Labooty, who was everything that a New York, New Jersey mob guy should be, he was breeding horses, fixing races, and gambling in 1980s money. Investigations by the FBI had him going through uh, betting up to $20 million at Trump casinos and losing perhaps 10. million, somewhere in that range. And it was not a secret that he was involved in organized crime. And the FBI told Trump and his organization that these guys were patronizing the casinos. Trump knew it, and uh, he didn't do too much about it. You know, there was at one point there was what about a $500,000 fine for not following the directives about facilitating gambling for the mob guys. But you know, over the years, you would hear stories about Trump's name associated with the crime legends. But again, to be fair, I don't feel an obligation to be fair to Trump right now, but in the interest of full disclosure, everybody that was building major buildings in New York, New Jersey, and all over the country, and Chicago too. But that was those were different families. That's a story for a different day, and Vegas and on. But Trump was intimately involved in these folks. But you think about it in terms of you make a Putin parallel, right? That I want to be the guy. I want people to see me, speaking as if I'm Trump, as the big dog, right? I've got money, flash money, right? I've got my name on these casinos. That's not the casino. That's the Trump Taj Mahal, right? And I've got these badass pinky ring, verifiable bad made members of organized crime, meaning they've killed people before. These are serious individuals. And I want to be seen as a bad guy because, well, maybe because I didn't get the love from my dad, and everybody in the development world in New York looks down their nose at me. So maybe here amongst the gangsters, I can be the guy. I don't know. May I? Can I? May I? Will you please invite me into your world? But not too close, because Trump is not he's not a tough guy. He grew up in Queens, right? A he wasn't spoiled to the point of being a super soft kid. I mean, he went to a New York Military Academy, but he wasn't a tough guy. He was not on the level of these guys that he was servicing as the clients, as the VIPs in the casinos. Castellano one of the men with the best names in all of organized crime history, Fat Tony Salerno, right? But these were old school guys. Salerno, I think, he was born before 1920, somewhere in there, and died in prison in Missouri, we'll call it, after being there for more than a decade. That's when the FBI got tough on organized crime and tried to break up the five families. And then, then there was John Gotti and Gotti's kid. But Mr. Labouty was, while not the top echelon of organized crime, he was a player, and Trump was always involved with the guys from New York and the guys from Philly to get things done. And again, he kind of liked that fast, dangerous life because he could insulate himself from it to a certain extent. So, yeah. So, and I really think that the appeal, you know, think about Vladimir Putin, a gangster in his own right. Has Vladimir Putin, do we wonder whether, no, Vladimir Putin has killed people before. He has directed people to be killed, opposition, but he's done it himself, right? So there's there is an intrigue there. He's a strong man, right? He's a verifiable badass, right? And so Putin back in, I mean, we're going back 12 to 14 years now, when Putin sort of captured Trump. There were Russian organized crime figures living in Trump Tower. There was Walter Stone. The what? The first name doesn't feel right. Anyway, the fixer guy that would get dirt on other people and do duress campaigns to influence politicians, Roger Stone, excuse me, all around the world, right? And that was a conduit between, Trump thought that he was his friend and subsequently used him, but that was all driven by Vladimir Putin, right? That was Putin's paid consultant, right? Stone. So. And there were organized crime figures. There were ones that were convicted of other crimes, that they didn't live at Trump Tower, but they were in that orbit. So there was always that element that Trump was comfortable with. Again, I'm not suggesting, and I've not ever read anything that stated definitively that he was himself intimately involved in organized crime, but he benefited from what they did, and he availed himself of their services when it suited his business interests, as it did in in Atlantic City. And then as the casinos went away, and you wonder where Trump got that big chunk of money from Fred, from his dad. But then there were the bankruptcies. And what Trump did during that period with the casinos, it was a shell game. And what he would do is leverage, right? This in a debt financing perspective. He would have this piece of real estate, this casino, and he would uh, leverage up the value, stories that well reported stories throughout his entire life about manipulating the appraised value of properties and leveraging them to borrow more and more on the property, refinancing, you know, home equity line of credit, whatever he could do to squeeze a little bit more cash out of a property and then move that money into the next game, right? And in the case of the casinos in Atlantic City, he would leverage them up and then file for bankruptcy. Not an unknown game, not an unknown strategy in commercial real estate, casinos, hotels, or otherwise, right? Leverage it up, rip all the cash out that you can, and with if you're going to strip it, rip it, and flip it, then if you have the assistance of, oh, I don't know, an organized crime family, then you can actually, after you build it, you can strip out the copper and the construction materials, and take care of your homies that way, and everybody gets something except the investors, right? And they, as always, the small guys get beat up, and the guys up the top get paid. So that was, the casino. He had, Trump had other casino deals. He had a little piece of one down in the Grenadines. He had uh, a, a riverboat, one of those, river boats with a casino in it, which was out in the nowhere part, the middle of the country. I don't know if it was in Indiana, Missouri. No dispersions on the middle of the country. I just mean in the away from the coast. He had an interest in one of those little uh, uh, boats with a casino on it, and that came and went. He had a deal with the with one of the indigenous one of the tribes in California, and worked with them for a little while, pulled out a lot of fees, and then the casino was bought out, and he was kicked to the curb. Most recently, in fact, in last within the last few months, Trump's family organization just got a check for about $100 million because if Bally was to be selected as the final candidate for one of three approved new New York State casinos, and Trump still had control of one of these properties, uh, which was called something Wharf or Dock. Um, and in fact, it turned out that way. Now, was there any nefarious? Well, Kathy Hochul doesn't have any. The New York governor doesn't have any time for Donald Trump. But guess who was intimately involved in influencing was Eric Adams, the former mayor of New York. Now, he's not a statewide guy. He's not as important as he'd like to think he is. But there, Trump has his advocates in New York, and they were awarded the deal. So there was an extra $100 million paycheck recently for getting that site steered to Bally's in New York State, the three new approved sites for casinos, which is exciting for New Yorkers. We'll do. Excuse me, please. We'll do an episode about not as much. Won't do casinos further. We'll do Las Vegas at some point, but sports betting, I'll certainly do an episode in the next month or so, because the impact of sports betting on youth in the country, because it's all a part of the the crypto sports betting gamification, TikTok, fast, freaking Jumba Casino ads with Ryan effing Seacrest all the time. You know, it is a way to victimize youth, senior citizens, and the poor. And the Jumba Casino, the free casino, is kind of in the way that TikTok is designed to exploit the mental health of our youngest citizens. Then those sort of online casinos are designed to set the table to victimize you in a larger sense, in a higher stakes online gambling format. So we'll do it's something I've been following for sometimes a little bit too closely, but I don't do any of my sports betting. In full disclosure, ahead of the story, is limited to horses in Hong Kong only. So that's a kind of a limited subset, because it's a smaller pool. Oh, whatever. That's another day. That's another podcast. That's another stream, as a matter of fact. So there's Donald still getting casino business. Got a check. That is Donald moved from Jersey. I mean, he's still there. He has the Bedminster Golf Club, where he buried his first wife on a fairway in Bedminster, New Jersey. So great, nice, sweet. Love you, hon. And he, New York, Trump Tower. At the same time that Trump Tower was being built, They were also building excuse me, the Jacob Javits Center, which is the magnificent convention center in Manhattan, right? And I mean, I remember going to the old convention center, which I mean, going to the hotel show there in the late 70s, right? I don't know what was it called, the Coliseum or whatever it was called, but before the Javits Center at that time. So there's all that demand for concrete, right? So you're thinking you're Paul Castellano and the Gambino crime family, and you've got Trump Tower going one way, you've got the Javits Center, which is a shit ton of concrete and trades and labor and getting you get a taste off of every deal. It was a great time to be in construction in New York, and Trump went forward and built other properties. You know, a lot of times he doesn't own the commercial property, but he licenses his name, right? And he's done that his entire life. And if you got a golf course in Timbuktu and you pay him X tens of thousands of dollars, then all of a sudden it's the Trump, uh, the Trump short game, uh, pun intended, golf course in Timbuktu. And that name association attracts a certain kind of person that sees him as a business success, and the gold and the flash and the failed universities and stakes and Bible sales and all of the things that go into making Donald Trump Donald Trump. Yeah, it's really it's a magnificent time to be an American. So yeah, so he is Donald Trump intimately involved in organized crime now as a 80-year-old man that happens to be living at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, but he's treating it like he owns it? No, I don't believe he is. Was he ever sitting around a table with organized crime figures, helping them make decisions about who they're going to kill? No. Who would ask him about important things if you think murder is important? Well, you know what I mean. He was not intimately involved in that, but he availed himself of their services. And if you read the record, what the way that he rewarded them for their quote unquote friendship was that he bought real estate from them for construction of real estate in both Jersey and New York at what was clearly inflated prices, because that's one of the ways that you sort of allow for tribute is you pay on a sliding scale. So if you here's my Italian is not so great, um, but in an old overused saying, you know, one hand washes the other and both hands wash the face, right? So if you're in organized crime and construction and you're trying to get a deal for a deal, a quid pro quo, right? Is that you can pay somebody a little bit more for real estate because you're going to turn around and mortgage it up to a certain extent. And in exchange, they're going to cut down on your long-term expenses by keeping a foot on top of the labor unions. And so you pay a little bit more now, net present value, right? Versus the labor, which the cost of which is going to rise above the rate of inflation in that time in the 80s before the crash. So you're wheeling and dealing, right? So you're involved, and these kind people, the five families, are involved in every aspect of that, like I suggested. You need electricians, you're involved. You need plumbers, you're involved. You need concrete, you're involved. If you need other building materials, you're involved. If you need security, you have a union problem in your hotel, right? Uh, you just phone a friend, right? Pick up the phone and problem solved. So it is. While some would try to do it another way, try to pay off in a creative and legally acceptable way, um, to avoid getting too deeply involved. But it's not it ain't easy because saying no no doesn't always mean no, right? To certain guys, including Donald J. Trump, right? So he has in his mind that's part of how the world works. So being involved in organized crime from a five family sense may be in his past. But I would submit that since 2012, 13, 14, right? So 12, 13, 14 years ago, when he became involved with Vladimir Putin, enlisted his help to win an election, right? To bring in outside consultants to work on the vote suppression, vote manipulation. Think about however more than a dozen years ago, AI was not what it is today, right? But Mr. Stone had systems and malign actors in Russia, in Iran, in China had entire teams that were years ahead of of other parts of the world in the ability to, you know, data corruption, fraud, influence, election manipulation, getting voter ID information, right? And we're going to have what will be a bloodbath on voter ID because uh, DOJ and Pamela Joe Bondi requested the state's voter roll information, and many of the blue states said "f no" and are litigating it. But she got every red state, every red state governor just said, "Yeah, of course, Donald J. Trump, my Lord and Savior. Of course, you can have all of that voter data. Won't even ask what you want it for because I just have to give it to you because otherwise I'll be primaried and I'm scared of losing my power." So that is the courageous people that were elected to serve you lay down for a freaking game show host. That's right. So he is. We all know what he is. We all know who runs him, and we all just do the math and say, "Well, it's only 3 more years." But look at what's happened in one. 3 more years is a little bit unsettling. Uh, can we say it's 1 more year because we're going to do so well in the midterm election, and then we're going to be able to exert more influence through House committees to put pressure on him to slow down bad behavior? Yeah, that's reasonable, but you can't plan as if that's going to happen. You have to plan a strategy to achieve that goal, but at the same time, you have to be prepared for the fact that it may not work out that way, and you're looking at a 28 scenario. So, in any case, I will leave you with Donald J. Trump, Paul Castellano, Fat Tony. Yeah, all of the mob bosses from Philly to New York, and how much fun they had selling concrete to Donald J. Trump over the years in New York and Jersey, and his new mob boss Vladimir Putin. It's been a delight, and we will talk to you sometime tomorrow. Have a beautiful day. Thank you very much.